Hey there, we're the West Lafayette Pirates and welcome to the show. We're here to share our thoughts on Northwestern athletics and college sports, with thoughts and analysis from the visceral to the statistical. We run our tailgate with the red pirate flag flying high above, as we give no quarter, especially the fourth. I'm Sam Walter.
I'm John Lacombe.
And I'm Eric Skoskauspo.
Real quick, before we get into tonight's episode, wanted to mention something that we have coming up, something that's going to be really, really cool. Northwestern football kickoff party at Double Clutch Brewing, benefiting True NU, is coming up, hosted by Lake the Posts. Jay Sharman, as well as Dave Ennett, Dan Persa are going to be hosting. John and I are going to be there. There's going to be a bunch of other, notable Northwestern alums and former coaches, players. Jacob Schmidt's going to be there if you want to come by and say hi. It's going to be a really, really cool event. On our Twitter feed at West Law Pirates, we have all the details there. I believe it's at Double Clutch Brewing in Evanston. Tickets are, I believe, $50. But the first 25 people to purchase are getting a free Ryan Field North Tower remnant, part of the Lake the Post's True NU auction that was going on. So
I'll tell you what, I just got my North Tower remnant that I purchased via donation to True NU. I don't mean this to sound like an infomercial, like literally just arrived after I got back from vacation 2 days ago. And on one hand, it is a weird piece of rock, but the way it's been sealed in a way that this is not going to like bleed bits of weird concrete dust and rock all over your home. It's got a cool little Northwestern tag that mentions it's from the North Tower. So it's pretty unique and it's pretty awesome. When you sit back and think about it, I kind of hemmed and hawed about is this something I really want around the house? I'm flipping stoked to have it. It's really cool. It's the sort of thing that when I'm much older, I'm already old, but when I'm much older than I am now, I'm pretty excited. Like this is going to be a pretty cool thing to look back on.
It's super cool. So, like I said, go to our Twitter, at Westlaw Pirates. We'll have all the details there, how to get tickets. It's going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll see as many of you there as possible. And with that, we'll go ahead and talk about Purdue as we continue our previews. Now turning the calendar into November. Purdue, a team that has not been good lately. Second year under Ryan Walters coming up this year. I know we were all real excited for him to get the opportunity coming over from as the DC at Illinois, going to Purdue. But 4-8 season last year. You look at any big national preview show, they got Purdue, kind of previewed down in the bottom of the standings, is what a lot of people are thinking. But John, let's talk about the Purdue defense. Please tell me George Karlaftis didn't clone himself and is back this year.
Well, I mean, you might be mistaken for thinking that because there still is a Karlaftis.
Yanni, we've been talking about Yanni for 3 years now.
Yanni's still there. But in a larger sense, like Sam said, it's year 2 under Ryan Walters. It's year 2 under DC Kevin Kane. And Purdue finds itself in a weird situation defensively. So last year, Purdue fielded this group of excellent players under these two guys. Dylan Thieneman was arguably the best defensive freshman football player in the nation at one safety last year. And at the other safety, Sanusi Kane was an NFL draft pick. Nick Skirton and Kydron Jenkins, a lot of you are probably aware of this. These guys piled up TFLs, and for a lot of the season, they were the conference's 2 sack leaders. I don't think it ended up that way, but they were number 1 and number 2 in the conference in sacks for a lot of the season. And, as we just said, Purdue still does have a Karlaftis back there, patrolling the linebacker core in Yanni Karlaftis. So I just named 5 impact football players for a defense that absolutely sucked. Purdue's scoring defense, the only defense in the conference to surrender 30-plus points a game, was worse than Indiana's defense, and Indiana's defense was an absolute train wreck. Purdue had a so-so run defense and an absolutely horrific pass defense. And keep in mind as I say that, remember, only 2 teams had more sacks than Purdue last year, and they were Penn State and Michigan. So the big question, this is the big question. It's a question that encompasses 2 teams, not just one. Both Purdue, who we're talking about right now, and Illinois, who we're going to talk about down the road. How much of that legendary Illinois success in 2021 and 2022 was due to Illinois having this absolutely transcendent secondary entirely populated with good NFL players? Well, we're not going to focus on the Illinois half of that here. But obviously, Walters established himself at Illinois as a DC who could take chances that both generated sacks and bolstered the run defense because he could operate in single man all the way around the back. So you can look at the individual statistical performances at Purdue last year and see the imprint of the same approach. Without the ability to cover receivers, without a dominant interior defensive line, and without a deep linebacker core. So yes, the sacks are there. And the run D is sort of there. And the pass D was absolutely god-awful. So what happens now? Well, it's not like Purdue's going to have a ton more talent this year. Kane's in the NFL. Skirton transferred to Texas A&M. The other key guys are back, and Purdue has a couple of promising young players, a couple SEC transfers coming in. But look, this thing's either going to start to work better or it's not. And like, on one hand, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater because this was only year 1 for Walters and Kane. So let's give them another year to pull this thing together. And perhaps their coaching is going to turn 5 impact players in 2023 into 7 or 8 impact players in 2024. Or maybe that won't happen. From our perspective, this was a weird game last year. If you remember, that had some stops and starts. But I think it's safe to say that the lingering offensive memories for all of us remain our wide receivers absolutely destroying Purdue's secondary and our O-line blowing a massive hole in the Purdue front that Cam Porter ran through on the way to the house, right? I don't see anything here that's going to affect those kind of things. I'm confident in the superiority of the Trench Cats in this game. And knock wood, those guys are going to be a healthy, well-working unit by November. By this point in the season. There simply is no guy in the Purdue secondary at corner who can cover Henning and Kurtz. Thieneman is awesome, but a safety can only do so much back there. We're going to see what this Purdue defense looks like as the season unfolds, but I would say at the very least forecast cloudy, and for us in this game, I really like our chances to score points.
John, you said a couple SEC transfers. I know we often source things differently. I'm looking at they could potentially be starting a nose tackle that came over from Penn State, another DT that came from Auburn, a outside linebacker from Georgia, a star from Stanford, and then new cornerbacks from Mississippi and Georgia, in addition to those other impact players you mentioned. I realize that's a lot of things going right and not a lot of depth, but I feel like there's an upside here that is a bit concerning, just knowing what Ryan Walters has done in the past with high-end talent.
I guess, but I guess another way you could look at it is again, I'm like, there are... let's say that a couple of those guys hit, right? Remember, Purdue lost a safety to the NFL. And they're, that's the weird thing where, again, I don't want to step on this too much because we're going to talk about this more when we get to Illinois, but there is a difference between having several impact football players and having a good defense. And Illinois was the standard bearer forever on that exact thing. And then when Ryan Walters was there, things totally flipped. But now there's this big question that was how much of that was about that transcendent group of guys? And again, when we get to Illinois, a lot of this is going to make more sense. But Scuzz, you're right. I mean, there's a couple big names on some of those schools of guys that are coming in, and maybe Walters can put something together here. I don't know.
It's guys that have played. I think that's the key for me. This is not like the third string DT that's doing a grad transfer to Purdue for a year to get a master's in aerospace engineering. Like,
yeah.
These are guys that played and started multiple games at big time programs, and
yeah,
by November 2nd,
it's possible. I mean,
so
and
all
and
these
again,
guys could be hurt by November 2nd, but then they could also be like a patchwork defense that has turned into a tapestry.
I suppose so. And maybe like a year from now, we'll be talking about how how Purdue just totally punted defensively on the 2023 defensive season while they put something together. Maybe that's what happens. I don't know. This defense was atrocious last year. Like, I can't stress enough how bad they were. They gave up 30 plus points a game. So it's a long road up, even if they get help from these transfers.
So offensively, Scuzz, I know they're not great, but like Devin Mockabee always seems to do really, really well against us for some reason. It's like, you look at Purdue and it's like they don't scare you, but they kind of do in a weird way. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It makes a ton of sense. If the Big Ten West were still alive, in my opinion, Purdue would be perfectly primed to be a dark horse agent of chaos. Now, I thought last year they had a lot of nice pieces that could come together, but that they'd be a work in progress given that everyone and everything was new, from the head coach to the quarterback, etc. And that they were. It's kind of hard to look at what they did last year and say exactly what went wrong. They increased their rushing average by 50 yards per game. That offsetted a decline of 70 yards per game in their passing, but you expect that after Jeff Brom and the quarterback turnover. They improved in sacks allowed and turnover margin. Mockabee was, to your point, really good running the ball. Card was really decent throwing the ball. Deion Burks emerged as a kind of a nice number one receiver overall. But they had their worst scoring rate since before Jeff Brom came to Purdue. Some of that is scheme and just the offensive genius that is Brom. Some of it is that they just couldn't put it all together. Card kind of got hurt midway through the year. He missed the Northwestern game, for example. He had a big drop-off in yards per attempt from his time at Texas. If anything, like if you can point to anything, it's that Purdue just had no explosion, no aggressiveness. They didn't put the fear into anyone. And I feel like teams could just kind of clamp down on them and not have to worry about getting killed in the way that O'Connell was dropping bombs to those receivers 2 or 3 years ago. They also had some serious kicking woes. So you talk about them, their defense. They dropped 2.5 points per game. Their kickers combined went 8 of 17.
Ooh,
that's pretty rough even for college kickers.
Yeah, yikes.
I mean, and like just generally, they scored less than their yardage and other metrics would have predicted. So again, I look at this as, I said it was going to be a work in progress. It clearly was, and they just kind of couldn't put it together. Now, the optimist in me says that was year one of a new coaching staff, and Card's first time starting. And while they had some experience in the receiver corps, there really wasn't a lot of pedigree to be excited about. And now in 2024, and this honestly may color what I'm seeing on the defensive side, John, too. I really look at Purdue as glass half full. They have a tremendous opportunity on offense to build on the foundation that they started with last year. So first and foremost, Card and Mockabee are both back, and they return 4 starters on offensive line. They pick up another 2 experienced starters in the portal, in addition to adding 4 other depth guys from places like Missouri, Notre Dame, and Colorado. They have a much deeper and experienced O-line room. Their quarterback coming back, their running back coming back. Mockabee, he's been a stud for a couple of years now. We were pretty excited to see what he could do last year. He 4.7 yards per attempt, 800 yards total, 6 TDs. Tyrone Tracy was the number 2 to him. It was, they were a really good combo. Tracy's gone, but they pulled Reggie Love in from Illinois via the portal. Maccabee and Love is a hell of a 1-2 combo in the backfield. Now, you remember from my preview last year that offensive coordinator Graham Harrell it was his first season too, right? But he's converting Purdue to the air raid, similar to Wisconsin. I kind of mused that. I thought it was going to be pretty interesting to see how those two teams, evolved, compare them to one another. I figured he'd be a bit more balanced than pass-happy Jeff Brom. And he also talked about attacking Big Ten defenses a lot with tight ends. Now, the first of those two things was definitely true. And it portends Graham's ability, in my opinion, to be flexible with his personnel in ways that I think will benefit Maccabee, Love, and this offense overall. The second bit about attacking with tight ends is still a question mark. Their number 4 receiver last year was a tight end, number 5 was a tight end, but neither one of them did much. They averaged less than 9 yards per catch. It's not exactly attacking with your tight ends. Similar to last season in the receiver room, there's a ton of turnover. They lose their top 4 guys. The backup tight end is back, and Maccabee from their top 6. That's it. That's bad, even. What is different from last year, though, is that on paper, there's some really exciting talent coming in. So Cam Brown is going to be the senior leader in this room. 26 starts and 800 yards coming from UCLA. Was also a 4-star recruit back at A&M back in the day. And then they add C.J. Smith and Denylon Morset from Georgia. I don't know how 4 guys from Georgia have ended up at Purdue this season across the offense and defense, but
very weird.
There's something in the water, you know what I mean? Now, they couldn't really get on the field in Athens, but the pedigree coming from that program at the wide receiver position, you kind of got to just give a little bit of respect, right? The tight ends just look okay. Max Clare is back. He caught 22 balls in 5 games last year. There's some decent depth guys. There's their top offensive recruit is a freshman QB named Marcos Davila. I don't expect him to play. If he does, that's probably a bad sign for them. But their number 2 guy is a tight end, Tavion Galloway, 6'5". He's only 230. He's a beanpole, but if he puts on some weight, he was in for spring, so he's already been working in the system, eating at the training table, everything for 6 months. If he's physically ready for the conference, he could really contribute to the type of attack that Graham Harrell wants to run. So in the end, by no means do I think this is going to be an awesome offense. But they've got a lot of pieces, and they're starting from a solid foundation. There is not a single team that we've previewed to date in the conference that returns both their quarterback and their offensive coordinator from last year.
Really?
It's Purdue and Illinois. That's it.
Wow. Huh.
And I think a hell of a lot more of the Graham Harrell Hudson Card combo than I do of what Illinois has at OC and QB. Part of that is that Harrell's been an excellent offensive coordinator at multiple stops. But then the offensive line is back. The top running back is back. They've got Reggie Love to add to the room. They have all the ingredients to make some noise. If just 2 of these wide receivers are able to hit big plays, just catch balls downfield, get separation from defensive backs, to give Purdue that explosion factor that they lacked last year, I think this offense could be really fun in 2024. Now their schedule, they can't win any bloody games because they've got the hardest schedule imaginable, but they could be really fun to watch.
I don't know. Let's have Sam take us through it, because I'll be honest, you're selling me a little bit. So,
if you or a loved one is seriously injured by someone else's negligence, hire Kent Simpson of the Simpson Law Group. After over a decade prosecuting murder cases in Chicago, Simpson opened his own firm focused on wrongful death and personal injury cases. He specializes in car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and other transportation accidents, as well as construction accidents, medical negligence, slip and falls, product liability, and more. Millions recovered for clients. No fee unless he wins. The Simpson Law Group. Compassion, empathy, and vigorous advocacy. Go to simpsonlawgroup.com or call 312-332-2107 for a free consultation. And go Cats. Yeah, so couple things that I noticed as we were going through this, and I'll highlight them as we go. They open up the season at home against Indiana State. Then they have a bye week before hosting Notre Dame. They make their one trip to the West Coast the week after when they go to Oregon State. They do not have a West Coast conference trip this year, interestingly enough. They're home for Nebraska, then they're at Wisconsin, at Illinois, home for Oregon. They get a bye week to prepare for us, and then go to Ohio State after that. They're home for Penn State, they're at Michigan State, and then they are at Indiana to wrap things up for the Old Oaken Bucket.
So here's the thing about this. Look, there are like a bunch of games on this schedule, and Purdue has no chance in hell of winning. Okay, but that's not the standard that they're working with, right? Like even 5-7 is an improvement, and 6-6 would be like a big step up, right? Like 6-6 in a bowl, like that's, and I feel like there's for sure a path. I'll be honest, Scuzz kind of sold me a little bit and won me over here, because one really easy way to frame this is, look, if Purdue's defense gives up 29 points a game this coming year instead of 30, like it's still an improvement, right? And it's very easy through that lens to argue Purdue's going to be better on both sides of the ball this year, because Scuzz is painting a picture of some really promising pieces, and on my side of the ball, it's the bar to clear is so low. So if you look at that and be like, all right, so let's say that in this weird way, Purdue is somehow an ascendant football team on both sides of the ball. I mean, Indiana State, an Oregon State team that is total overhaul, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
like,
100%.
Like the shell of what they were.
right,
But
absolute
playing
shell.
at Corvallis is like that. I mean, that's
True.
That's a flight and a drive. That's rough
True.
on the body.
It's a big game for them, I think, right?
Yeah.
Illinois were a big game for them.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan State, Indiana. It's
The thing that works against them is that they have 6 away games, and 5 of them are amongst their most winnable matchups, and that just you're not gonna win at Indiana, at Michigan State, at Illinois, at Wisconsin, and at Oregon State. You're just not gonna take all 5 of those.
yeah. So I mean, again, like I think 5-7. I
Yeah,
feel like there is some lens though where they could go 6-6 and bowl, and that would be a titanic victory and a huge step up for this football team. I don't think they're going to get there, but I mean, you could talk me into 5 wins here, and I just really hope that we're not in that group for sure.
Their non-con last year was Fresno State, Virginia Tech, and Syracuse, and they're parlaying that into Indiana State, Notre Dame, and Oregon State.
I know they see Notre Dame a lot. Does Notre Dame go to Purdue a lot, or is that game mostly in South Bend?
Oh, they go back and forth. They've
Okay.
gone back and forth for a long
I
time.
would say, though, I mean-
Purdue has no chance in that game. I'm sorry.
sure. That's what I was
no,
gonna
no,
say.
yeah.
Yeah.
In the new Big Ten era, Purdue has no business scheduling Notre Dame. What
Yeah,
are you
I
doing?
don't. Yeah,
It's
I mean,
a team off your schedule. Like, you need that win.
so and then, last year they had Ohio State, but and Michigan, but this year they get Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon. They just have.
It's brutal.
I mean, they're started from a starting point of 5 assured losses,
And and Nebraska.
and then like 2 additional almost guarantee. Like they're just not going to go 5-1 on the road. It's just not going to happen. They're going to end up 3-3 on the road. So you're talking 7 losses almost out of the gate, and that sucks for a team. I really hope Purdue fans are dialed into this in a way that if this team does go 5-7, they're seeing it as a step forward, because it really is.
Let's paint it this way, right? Here's the most optimistic scenario possible, and I don't feel like it's too much stretching credulity. Purdue could go 4-3 down the stretch of their season, in a stretch that includes games against Oregon, Ohio State,
Yeah.
and Penn State. I mean,
Totally.
it just takes beating Indiana, Michigan State, Illinois, and yes, us. Yeah. So, I mean, that I don't like. I don't like that we're very much going to be probably a big game for this football team at home, and obviously, like, we're sandwiched in between Oregon and Ohio State on their schedule, which I don't know how that breaks for us one way or the other, but Purdue is really going to be looking at this game. I would imagine that we're going to be a game that's going to help determine, potentially whether they bowl or not. So we're going to have to bring our A game here.
Their health on defense is going to matter so much, because it's the sort of thing where taking all these disparate parts and putting them together to make a cohesive defense is plausible against a pro-style attack, against an attack that you can predict and prepare and plan for.
Right.
Against an attack that is going to be designed specifically to misdirect and read and put tension on your weakest components, where you have to rely on, as a defense, you have to rely on the trust that the guys next to you are going to do the right thing and make the right decision, and that nonverbal, almost like, telepathic communication that like you see Iowa display year after year, right? Like that's going to be really hard for this defense, even if they're healthy, even if, most of these transfers are making an impact. That is going to be very hard for them. I think that's the upside for Northwestern this year.
Yeah, this is a Zach Lujan show-out game. Now, do I wish we were getting Purdue and the defense a lot earlier in the season? Yes. But, again, there's still a really strong chance that this is going to be an absolutely hideous defense. And Zach Lujan's going to get a piece of it.
Anything else to mention about Purdue before we get out of here?
I don't know. I find myself pulling for these guys.
It's hard not to. It's hard to hate Purdue.
Well, we begrudgingly loved Ryan Walters when he was at Illinois, just because we thought, like, holy crap! To juxtapose what he was doing with Illinois with what we were seeing from Jim O'Neill was, we were all just insanely envious, and so that combined with it's a team that's been down for so long. We all liked Brome. We thought he was such a smart guy and a great guy. Like, the only reason he left Purdue is that it was literally to go save his alma mater. So I like, yeah, you kind of feel for these guys. As much as I can't stand their basketball team, I will be, with the exception of November 2nd, I'll be pulling for them in football season.
Boo booey. Just wanted to get those 2 words in.
There you go. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and leave it there for tonight. Head to our website, westlawpirates.com, where you can leave comments and questions. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and YouTube at westlawpirates. And email the show, westlawpirates@gmail.com. Tune in next time as we give our visceral and statistical views on Northwestern athletics. And look for us in the west lot of Ryan Field flying the red pirate flag, because we give no quarter, especially the fourth. For John Lacombe and Eric Scasbo, I'm Sam Walter. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.